Welcome to The Real Story. I'm your host, Riley Lewis. Thank you for joining us. History isn't lived, it's made. History isn't something that just happens to us passively. It's something that people actively create. And oftentimes, everything comes down to just one moment. One moment can dramatically change the entire course of human history. And history shows as much. From the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in June of 1914, which ignited a world war, to the fall of the Berlin Wall, one single moment can literally change everything. And that brings us to our top story. President Trump is currently touring Asia, and the trip has already produced some historic moments. And another one is expected to happen this Thursday, when he locks eyes with Xi Jinping, the leader of China, for the first time since 2019. From presiding over the signing of a peace deal between Cambodia and Thailand in Malaysia, after brokering a ceasefire between them earlier this year, to meeting with the prime ministers of Malaysia and Japan, it's already been a major diplomatic pursuit. He's also signed 2 historic trade deals with Cambodian and Malaysian officials, and even a trade framework agreement with Thailand, all of which comes amidst growing concerns about tariffs. But now President Trump is also preparing for what could be the most important diplomatic meeting of the entire year, a showdown with Xi Jinping in South Korea. He's set to meet with the Chinese leader for the first time since 2019 at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit this week. And the meeting is far more than just a photo op. It'll be a strong test of the very foundations of the relationship between the US and China. In fact, their encounter could redefine the world's economic landscape for generations to come. And the setting itself really underscores the moment's historical weight. 2 leaders of the world's largest economies meeting in a forum that emphasizes economic cooperation and trade, both of which will be at the center of their discussion. The historical echoes are profound. Every major meeting between US and Chinese leaders, from Richard Nixon's visit in 1972 that literally opened China up to the rest of the world, to the summits that have navigated the rise of China as an economic powerhouse, has been a pivotal moment. So now that brings us to the nuts and bolts of this upcoming meeting. The most pressing issues at hand that are expected to be discussed are: number 1, a potential extension of the tariff truce that is set to expire on November 1, averting Trump's threatened 100% duties on Chinese imports, a measure that was announced after China expanded restrictions on the export of rare earths. And thirdly, a commitment from China to resume substantial purchases of American goods like soybeans. Now, some other critical sticking points that are expected to be discussed include coming to agreements over nuclear power, China's dependence upon Russian oil, and most importantly, stemming the flow of fentanyl precursor chemicals from China, chemicals that are fueling America's opioid crisis. So where exactly does that leave things? 2 rival nations staring down a pivotal historical moment with stakes that shouldn't be underestimated. And a successful outcome here would likely be a de-escalation. It would address the most immediate issues, the new tariffs and a chokehold on the supply of rare earths. But whether or not it would be more of a truce or more of a peace treaty depends upon how things really go. But in either case, Trump's trip to Asia is yet another example of how history isn't lived, it's made. Now, here with their reaction is Steve Abramowicz, a podcast host for the Heartland Journal, and Colonel Rob Maness, a 32-year combat veteran of the U.S. Air Force and host of the Rob Maness Show. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Good to be here.
So I'd like to start with you, Colonel, because this rivalry is the most important geopolitical rivalry of this century. That's very clear. And I'm wondering what you're expecting to see and whether or not you think we can turn a new leaf in terms of seeing cooperation between Washington and Beijing.
Well, it's interesting because we've been cooperating with Beijing for over 40 years, and look where we're at. So as the president goes into this, I hope that he keeps that in the back of his mind that he needs to accomplish some things from a national security and defense perspective, so that we can deter China and don't have to go to war with them. One is uh, keep in mind that there are hundreds of thousands of Chinese military age males within our country, and that China is in a state of unrestricted warfare with the United States as he goes in to negotiate these deals. They cannot just be on economic cooperation. They
Yes.
have to come from the background of this national defense perspective, and we are losing in that combat. And that's what it is. It may not be kinetic combat, but it is combat because the fifth generation warfare that the Chinese have been perpetrating on the United States internally and externally all around the world has to be dealt with in order for us to be able to have economic cooperation. As far as the deals themselves, I think he has set the table very nicely with the rare earth mineral deals, especially that he has cut with the other Asian countries to go in with a big stick and say, look, here's what we're doing with countries right here. So you're not going to be able to harm us as much as you thought you would. Let's come to the table and talk about this from that perspective. But the bottom line with rare earth minerals is we have to bring the processing and mining capabilities back to the United States of America. We cannot rely on foreign even allies in perpetuity if we want to have a strong national defense. And every aspect of these economic deals, from trade to the stock market, has to consider the unrestricted warfare that China is conducting on us and has been for many, many years. Everything from farmland they own near our strategic sites, the balloon surveillance satellite that floated over every strategic nuclear command center and missile base before it was shot down in the Atlantic Ocean. All of those issues have to be dealt with, and that has to be the background and backdrop of what the president is talking about with Xi.
Well, I think those issues about national security and defense sort of dovetail with economics when we get to the issue of Taiwan, which lies only 80 miles off the coast of mainland China. We have so much invested into Taiwan, and it seems to me pretty clear that China thinks of Taiwan basically as a colony of mainland China. So we'll have to see what comes with that issue. But Steve, I want to pivot on that point. So the US and China, two huge countries, two power players on the world stage, US being the top dog, the number one superpowerhouse on the world stage. China obviously wanting to replace the US as the world's number one superpower. It leads to a lot of conflict, and I want to get your analysis about what you're expecting to see from this summit between President Trump and Xi Jinping.
Yeah, excellent question. I mean, it's been a dance for quite a while. As you said in your opening, Nixon went to China, Trump went to China, but he also went to Japan and Australia. So what was a almost 100% monopoly on rare earths in the market, Trump has been able to diversify supply, not only Australia and Japan in this Asian tour, but right here at home. For the first time ever, we're actually able to get our own rare earths because they're not as rare as the name would imply. And I always like to point out, when Trump was reelected, the panicans came out, right? But they've been proven wrong again because people just underestimate Trump constantly. The stock market closed with new highs after China reached this deal, but it wasn't just China. It's also the pressure that he's putting on our neighbors to the north, Canada, which, China, Canada, and Mexico are our top $3 trillion worth of trading partners right there. And so he has been able to say, y'all have had a 50-year, I guess, since Nixon came to you and opened up the markets and we got you into the WTO, but it's been very unfair. The earth has been tipped out of balance, and everything's been going into China. And so Trump comes along right there in his book. I wrote an article today, right there in his book, Art of the Deal. He literally says he knows the Chinese mind. He understands it. And he's proven to be accurate because they blinked. They said 100% tariffs if you don't behave. They said, okay, we'll behave. Those went away, and boom, stock market at new highs. So pretty exciting times actually for trade. And when you think about it in terms of business, and especially in light of all these layoffs that we've just listed today from some of the biggest companies, including UPS and Amazon.
Yes.
And I got to give kudos to Scott Bissett, right? He's the guy basically who got the soybean farmers of America, which were doing 50% of the exports in 23 and 24
Yes.
to China, to basically say it's going to be a great deal for you guys into the future. That's huge. Our farmers matter.
I think completely they do. That's the backbone of America. And to think that there are so many Chinese entities that are so heavily invested in American agriculture is extremely alarming, Steve. But just to follow up then on that point, here's what I'm noticing. It's the story of a reckoning, because previous presidents, left and right, from Bill Clinton to George Bush and Barack Obama, have really set the stage and ceded a lot of control to the Chinese, allowing them to just rise as an economic and military giant in the world. So I want to ask you about President Trump's more confrontational approach to China. What do you make of it?
If you're asking me, I'm not a military guy, but I can tell you that the old carrot and big stick seems to be working quite a bit, because I'm old enough to remember when they were used to fuss about dual use technology that really created their satellite system and their ballistic missile system and pretty much everything that we see, allowing them to threaten their neighbors in the Pacific, including Japan, including Taiwan. Well, now Trump gets involved and he basically says, we're not going to play by those old rules anymore. You're going to play fair, by our standards of fair, not the Chinese standard of fair. And it's working. And had he not, who knows where we would be right now, because they literally had, I hate to say it, but a lot of spies working inside the country that were sending a lot of our information and technology back, including our intellectual property, and causing trillions of dollars of economic damage that seems to be halted right now, where America can actually get back to R&D and innovation and have confidence that if we're going to have a space program, it is American and not something that's going to be stolen out from under us. That is a big deal. And that could have led to a real war, a shooting war. I mean, that is espionage, that is war crimes. And if he's able to stop that and able to get us to be strategic partners and not competitors and not enemies, then maybe we'll have peace in our time, at least in the Pacific.
Very interesting. That brings me back to you, Colonel. I want to get your thoughts about this more confrontational, upfront approach. China is militarizing the South China Sea, just investing all of its money, not into caring for other countries like the US does, but into its own development. They're stealing IP from American businesses, buying up American farmland, doing all sorts of things to sabotage the American citizen. So what do you think of President Trump's approach to confronting Xi Jinping?
Yeah, Riley, and I agree with Steve. I mean, this moment using the carrot and the stick is very similar to Ronald Reagan's approach to the Reykjavik conversations that he had with the Soviet Union and Gorbachev there. And that's where the president's got to come from, and he will. I've read his book too, and that's the way he does business, and that's why all of the normal punditry, and I think Steve called them the panicans, are 99.999% wrong. But it's got to come from that position of strength.
Yes.
And we've got to come to terms with the things that you just listed out, though. Those are still operating in this country. And while the corporate espionage may have curtailed, and the government espionage has not curtailed, we continue to find people inside our military, both in uniform and operating as government civilians that are spies for the Chinese Communist Party. You see it almost weekly, another arrest out of the DOJ with an affidavit charging someone. And that has to be dealt with in this conversation at some point. It can't just be about economics. It has to be about resetting the table from a national security perspective too, and get all of that cleaned out. And that's a very, very difficult problem, because it's been 50 years since Nixon opened to China. And for the last 35 to 40 years, we have been welcoming these people in here with open arms. And under the Biden administration, hundreds of thousands of Chinese military-age males came in illegally, so they're not tracked. They're not monitored by and large, and we don't know what they're doing around with these farmland purchases that are around our strategic installations. We're not very affirmative on tracking that down and doing what needs to be done, which is exposing it and removing it, kind of like a cancer from a human body. You got to go where the tumors are and find out where they're at. And if we can do that using economic and trade talks, that's fantastic. But it's got to be part of that solution.
Absolutely. Very well said. I want to thank you for your insight, and thank you for your time, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up next, while President Trump tours all over Asia, setting all sorts of records, his second in command has set a record of his own, having just visited the site of Jesus' crucifixion in Jerusalem. More details about it after the break.